All right, welcome to the webinar. My name is John Kunz, and I'm with the Cloudburst Group, one of HUD's technical assistance providers. Today, we'll be walking you through setting up your 2017 Annual Action Plan amendments in IDIS. We'll be able to spend a portion of today's sessions actually working in IDIS, so you can see the process within the eCon planning suite. I'm joined today by Chris Andrews, a colleague from Cloudburst, and Beth Hendricks from the Office of Block Grant Assistance at HUD. Chris, Beth, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure, thank you, John. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. This is Chris Andrews. I've been working with Beth and with HUD for the past 5 or 6 years on the eCon planning suite and trainings and resource developments. I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
Hi, and I'm Beth Hendricks. I'm from HUD headquarters, and I work with your field offices on helping them with the eCon planning suite.
All right, thank you, Chris and Beth. So before we start, I do want to point out a few things about the webinar. So first, there are a lot of you listening, which is really great, but this also means we have to mute the phones to eliminate some of the background noise. The webinar is scheduled to run 90 minutes. That's a long time to sit and listen, so we're doing a few things to help you learn and have a chance to voice your perspective. So first, we're using polls where we'll ask for your feedback about what you are currently doing in the eCon planning suite. Second, we will pause at times to see if we can answer your questions. We want you to submit questions through the question feature of the webinar dialog box. We'll do our best to respond to as many questions as we can, but if we don't, remember that you can submit questions to the AAQ, or Ask a Question. We have a team that's working to turn those around for you. Now, the last thing I want to ask of you before we go into session objectives and our first poll is that you dedicate this period of time to focusing on the webinar. This is so much easier if you close your email and put away your phone. Before we get started, we'd like to understand where you are in your consolidated plan. And so we have a question up here. Basically, I'm going to put a poll up, and it's going to ask you to fill in the appropriate year. So you should all see a poll up on your screen, and please just click on the appropriate years that is your consolidated planning cycle. The results coming in, we'll give you just a little longer. Okay. Well, let's share the results. So as we look at it, there's a small number, just 8%, that you started your year way back in 2013, so you're in your final year of your action plan. Another 9% that started in 2014 in your 4th year of your action plan. And then as we really see the bulk entered their first action plan, the consolidated plan last year, 2015. A number, 20%, started in 2016, and still 7% who has one due next year in 2017. Well, actually, I guess it is already 2017. All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about the goals for the session. We basically have 3 goals for the session. The first is to make sure that you are prepared to correctly set up your 2017 action plan. There are a number of steps that you must do to creating your 2017 action plan to make sure that it is correctly associated with your consolidated plan and will not require you to set up your action plan again. Second, as the program year 2016 will be ending in a few months for many of you, we want to make sure you are prepared to correctly enter all amendments for your 2016 action plan into IDIS. Third, we want to highlight a number of best practices and recommendations to streamline your action plan and amendment process in the eCon planning suite to both inform your CAPER and to set you up correctly for the program year. And finally, we want to make sure that you have ample time to ask your questions about setting up your 2017 action plan and completing any amendments prior to the end of 2016 program year. As such, we have a couple of breaks for questions, and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can. Before getting started, I do want to highlight a few of the Consolidated Plan and eCon Planning Suite resources HUD currently has available. These resources, which include desk guides, toolkits, quick guides, webinar recordings and transcripts, and troubleshooting guides, are all available on the HUD Exchange. We'll show you where these are saved at the end of the session. Now, two items that I would like to highlight will be coming out soon. First, we are planning a webinar devoted to projects later this spring, and we will be announcing the date for that webinar in the next week or two. And second, HUD has started developing a training curriculum in all elements of the eCon planning suite. All right, let's now turn to setting up your 2017 action plan. To correctly set up your action plans, there are a series of steps that you should follow in a sequential order to avoid any errors or issues in your action plan. Before even starting the action plan in IDIS, you should determine if you need to complete any amendments to your consolidated plan. This may be to reflect a new priority or strategic initiative, or may be due to receiving new funding source from HUD. This amendment must be completed to ensure that your 2017 action plan can be associated with the amended consolidated plan. Next, create the 2017 action plan. We will walk you through instructions on how to either copy or add a new action plan and what you need to make sure it is correctly set up for this action plan. Next, update projects. If copying a project, you will need to remove the copied projects and create new 2017 projects. If adding a new action plan, you will need to create new projects for 2017. We will show you how to do this in more detail later in the session. Next, review the Goal Outcome Indicators, or GOIs. It is a best practice for all of your goal outcome indicators to align from your strategic plan goals to your action plan goals to your projects. We recommend you do this manually by printing out those screens respectively and cross-referencing them. Ensuring these are all aligned will ensure that your projects and activity outcomes will automatically pull into the CAPER. And finally, submit your CAPER to HUD in IDIS. Let's talk about timing. A lot of questions have come in already about the timing for action plan submission, given that allocations have not yet been made. So remember, you cannot submit your consolidated plan or 2017 action plan until allocations have been made. This is outlined in CPD Notice 16-18, which is linked here, and we'll make sure all of you receive this link as well. This will likely result in you submitting your action plan after your normal submission date. With that in mind, remember all 2017 action plans must be submitted by August 16, 2017. This is a requirement, and this deadline cannot be changed. Once you submit your plan and it is reviewed and approved, and the congressional releases happen, grant agreements will be executed. What you can do at this time is to begin to prepare your draft and finish your 2016 amendments you may have. All right. Now, knowing that the Consolidated Plan amendments must be completed prior to starting your 2017 action plan, I'd like to stop for a poll question to see how many of you are planning to complete an amendment to your Consolidated Plan as part of your PY 2017 planning process. So let me put the poll up. So again, if you could look on your screen and answer the question, are you planning to complete an amendment to your Consolidated Plan as part of your 2017 action plan? Yes, no, or not sure? Votes are coming in. All right. Let's look at the results. So it looks like exactly a quarter of you are planning to complete an amendment to your Consolidated Plan as part of your action plan process. 45% say no, and 30% say not sure yet. Interesting. Okay.
Well, and that's great to see, John. So I think for all of you, and again, this is Chris Andrews from Cloudburst, and my colleague John Coons and Beth Hendricks from HUD on today's webinar, for those of you joining in the past few minutes. For those of you who are planning an amendment to your Consolidated Plan, or for those of you who may not be sure that you'll be doing an amendment, within the system, it is very important that you begin the amendment to your Consolidated Plan even before starting your 2017 action plan. And where that becomes very critical is thinking about the slide that John just presented on timing, is recognizing that we're working within the confines of CPD Notice 1618 that's guiding the submission and the timeline for your 2017 action plan. And those action plans can't be submitted until after the allocations have been made. So with that in mind, it's very, very important that you're beginning to prepare that Consolidated Plan amendment now in the eCon planning suite. You're not necessarily submitting it, but you're preparing it so it will be ready to be submitted. And then you'll be able to begin your 2017 action plan right away. So for those of you who are in the not sure category in terms of completing a con plan amendments, just as a reminder for everyone, your amendments to your Consolidated Plan and amendments to your action plan, those are defined in your citizen participation plan of what is constituting a substantial or a non-substantial amendment to your Consolidated Plan or action plan. Examples of amendments may be changing funding sources. You may be receiving a new funding source from HUD. You may be adding or removing or revising your strategic plan goals. You may be adjusting your priority needs. There may have been a change. If you started your con plan cycle in 2013 or 2014, you may have new priority needs that were not clear, not apparent in your community at the point of developing your con plan. Or you may have new target areas. You may have created a neighborhood revitalization strategic area, or you may have a local target area, or you may be connected to another funding source from a different agency or from a state program that's targeting fundings that you're wanting to leverage with your HUD dollars. And all of that may require an amendment to your Consolidated Plan. Now, just one caveat, and I think this is important as we're looking within the eCon planning suite structure, is to remind everyone that your year one action plan is actually embedded in your consolidated plan. And so if you started your plan in 2016, and if you are going to be making an amendment just to your 2016 action plan from the system, that will actually look like an amendment to the consolidated plan from a system perspective. It will just be an amendment to the action plan portion of it, but you would be creating a copy and a new consolidated plan. For amendments, and I think Beth and John and I will repeat this a few times in today's session, it's very, very important that your amendments are marked in IDIS as review completed. And that is true for both substantial and non-substantial amendments. We really want to make sure that those amendments are marked as review completed, because that is then the version that will be used to inform your CAPER.
And Chris, this is Beth Hendricks from HUD. I just want to reiterate the review completed status is real important before you start your next action plan or even your CAPER or the amendment. The reason why is the review completed status in your plan tells IDIS to download information from that plan into future action plans and CAPERs. So it's really important that you're in that status to allow that information to then flow to future planning documents.
A great point, Beth. Again, just to summarize here, the main point on your consolidated plan amendment before we move into talking about your 2017 action plans and or amendments to action plans is to make sure that consolidated plan amendment is started before beginning your 2017 action plan. At the point of setting up your annual action plan, you have two options in working off of your 2016 action plan and your corresponding consolidated plan. Your first is to create a copy of the 2016 action plan and copy that forward to 2017. And when you create that copy, that will copy every piece of text verbatim from 2016 into 2017. So with that in mind, you will still need to go into that action plan and edit and revise content. One place that you will definitely need to revise content, and we'll talk about this in more depth in a little bit, is in your projects, because it's carrying forward your 2016 projects, but keeping them as your 2016 projects in what's being copied. But you do have all of that content to work off of, and you're just making edits and revisions within the system. Your second option is to create a brand new 2017 action plan. It will still be linked to your consolidated plan, but it will be a completely blank template, and you'll be entering brand new content. And all of the fields will need to be completed to finish your 2017 action plan. Now, it looks like we've already gotten a couple of questions coming in asking about, is it better to copy the action plan or is it better to create a new action plan? And a big part of it is preference. If you feel more comfortable editing and revising content, or if you would rather just start from a blank template. As a general rule, I think copying an action plan is best if your program is not changing significantly from 2016 to 2017. If you're still focusing on the same goals, if you're still focusing on the same priorities, if your corresponding policies and procedures and monitoring and anti-poverty strategy are all relatively the same or have not been updated significantly, then it may be easier to work off of that copied action plan and just update the information as needed. Now, for creating a brand new action plan, for creating a blank action plan, this may be best if there are significant changes. If you've made an amendment to your consolidated plan and you're including new goals, or if you have pivoted your approach within the program and you want to describe a new approach or a new method of distribution or allocation within your action plan, then it may be easier to start with a blank version. But again, it's completely up to you and what you feel most comfortable with. So with that being said, and you all may have already done this, John will turn to another poll question. And the poll question is, are you planning to copy or add a blank action plan for 2017? Will you create a copy and work off of that copy, or will you be adding a new blank action plan and adding all that content into the system? We'll give everyone just a few more seconds to respond. Okay, let's go ahead and close that poll and share the results. Wow, Beth and John, it looks like the vast majority folks on the line are planning to copy a previous action plan. About 63% of you, 20% of you or so are planning to create a new blank action plan, and about 15% aren't sure. So let's spend a little bit of time walking through the steps in IDIS on how to go through and copy on that previous action plan. If we can close these results, come back to my screen and just bear with me here for 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just logging into IDIS, so just give me 1 second here. Okay, and hopefully you are now seeing my IDIS screen. Beth and John, are you able to see my IDIS screen?
I see it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so we'll just pause here and walk through the steps for copying an action plan. And in copying an action plan, the important things that you need to know are the source plan year and source plan version for the action plan that you are wanting to copy. As a brief aside, for all of you who started your comp plan in 2016 or in 2016 to 2020 cycle, and so 2017 will be your year 2, your source plan year and version will come from your consolidated plan, because that is where your year 1 action plan is included. For everyone else, copying going into years 3 through 5, that source plan year and version would come from your previous action plan. And this is one of those things you want to make sure that you get it right. And it's easy to end up with a couple of copies or a couple of versions of your action plan. If you make an amendment, if you start and then realize that you made a mistake and needed to start over again. And it is always a good practice to double check and make sure that you're creating a copy of that correct plan. Because I think for Beth, for John, for me, you know, we see this a lot. This is one of those things that you can't go back and change. Once you create that copy, if you associate it with the wrong consolidated plan, or if it's copied off of the wrong action plan, you'll have to do that over again. You can't change that once it's been done. So with that being said, it's always a good idea to go in and make sure that you're selecting the correct action plan to work off of. So I came here into the annual action plan screen, and I'm just here in the UAT version of IDIS, so we're able to play around here and it won't have any impact on the grantee. I'm going to select 2016 and click search, and I am now seeing that we have one action plan for 2016. And so these are the two fields here that I want to make note of, the year and the version. Now click on copy on the annual action plan. Enter that source year, that was 2016. Enter the version. My new program year will now be 2017. And I'm just going to give it the version of today's date. Is not an amendment. We're creating a new action plan. Go ahead and click copy. You'll see it comes back. I'm still searching in 2016, so I'm going to change it now to 2017. And this is something that I think is really valuable, these search criteria, especially as we're adding more and more action plans into our system, is to remember that you can search by year. If you end up searching by all years, you're going to see quite a few action plans, and you may be already moving on to a second page. So I see we have two here. I see version 4.4. This is the version that we just created. Go ahead and click on edit. And I now have my annual action plan for 2017. And I will just go ahead, I'll open up one of these screens. And all of the content that was in my 2016 action plan has copied over into the 2017 action plan. Now, we'll come back to this and we'll talk a little bit about the project screen. But one thing that I would like to point out is here on the AD26 screen, there's some important information. One, you can change the title from AAP copy. So I'm just going to again call this a 4.4 webinar. But I see the program year and I see the consolidated plan to which this action plan is associated. And that's very important. You want to make sure that your action plan is always associated with your most current consolidated plan. And again, this is something that if it is incorrectly associated, this is not something that we can then go in after the fact and change. You need to make sure that your action plan is being associated with the correct consolidated plan at the point of creation, or that you're copying an action plan that is correctly associated with the most current consolidated plan. We'll pause here, and I know there are some of you who are wanting to create a new action plan, and we'll walk through those steps in a minute. But Beth or John, anything that you all would like to add on copying the action plan?
So this is Beth Hendricks from HUD headquarters, and it's really important on this 8026 screen that you make sure everything is set up correctly before you hit the save button. Once it's saved, nothing can be changed. So it's real important, not only when you're making a copy, but also when you're creating new, that you're feeling good about the consolidated plan you've attached it to, the version, and also any name title change that you can to it as well.
That's a great point, Beth, and you see here already from copying it, all of these fields are read-only. If I copied a plan that was associated with the wrong consolidated plan, I can't change that now. I would have to create a new copy or create a new blank plan. Right? And the same is true when you're adding a new plan, and we can turn and move to that right now. So if you're wanting to add a blank plan instead of copying a plan, you can do that. You do that by clicking the Add button under the Annual Action Plan. I'll go ahead and take 2017. I'll just call it 4.4 version 2 as my title, and 4.4 version 2 as well in my version. Select all of the programs that are included. And this is a very important question here. Is the annual action plan associated with a consolidated plan? The answer at this point for everyone on the line is yes. Everyone should have a consolidated plan in the system. You are wanting to select the consolidated plan with which you will be associating this action plan. Select yes. Click the Associate button, and now we'll go ahead and we'll search for our consolidated plan. I see here we have one consolidated plan, 2015. Select the radio button, click Select, and now to the point that Beth was just making, double check, triple check this screen. All of this information you cannot change once you click Save. Make sure your program year is correct. Make sure your programs included are correct. Make sure that you've selected the correct consolidated plan. It sounds very easy, but every week we will see or receive a request from a grantee who entered the wrong program year or did not check all of the programs included. So double check all of this information before clicking Save. Once you do that, click Save, and we now have a brand new blank 2017 action plan to which we can add all of our action plan content to. I'm going to return to the PowerPoint deck here. And we'll skip forward. We did include screenshots of all of this. For those of you, for when we send the slides out, just so you can see that process on the PowerPoint deck as well. But I do want to pause here on just a few exceptions and nuances for consortia grantees. Consolidated plans and action plans can only be created by the consortia lead, and that includes copying the prior year action plan. All of that action that we did, if you are a participating grantee in a consortium, you cannot do that. That is the responsibility of the lead grantee. the lead is also the only entity to submit the action plan in IDIS. When the lead submits the lead plan, it actually bundles all of the plans together and submits them as one package to HUD. There are some great instructions. John mentioned the quick guides earlier that walk through this process for consortia grantees, and we will make sure to send those out to everyone after today's session.
Chris, this is Beth. I just wanted to reinforce the use of those directions for consortia. It's often a confusing process because grantees often think, I'm a CDBG entitlement, so I have my own plan. But really in the world of consolidated planning, a consortia is the lead for all planning processes. The consortia lead is the one who drives the eCon planning suite actions.
A great point.
Thanks, Chris and Beth. All right, so now that we have talked through the process of setting up your 2017 action plan, let's just highlight a few key reminders, and we'll point out each of these in more depth. So first, the start year should always be the HUD program year. I know a number of you on the line may have a different fiscal year schedule, and as such, your local fiscal year may be 1 year, and the HUD program year will be different. Your action plan should be the HUD program year. Second, confirm that the action plan is associated with the correct consolidated plan. Chris spent a little bit of time talking about that. As we talked about earlier, make sure that your goal outcome indicators are the same for the strategic plan, the consolidated plan, strategic plan, and your annual action plan goals and projects. And finally, ensure your projects are correctly set up. Okay, so to confirm that your action plan program year and your consolidated plan association is correct, you can look on the AD26 screen as shown here. And just remember, again, we've said this a number of times, once you create your action plan, you cannot edit this information. So if it is incorrect, you will need to go back and create a new action plan.
Great, thanks, John. And we'll just talk about, as you're working through your action plan, a best practice in aligning your goal outcome indicators. And it's very important in your planning process as you go from your consolidated plan to your action plan, to your projects and activities, and ultimately into your CAPER, that your goal outcome indicators are aligning. And the reason being is that it will make the reporting in your CAPER that much easier. I think the vast majority of you on the line have gone through at least one CAPER in IDIS, and in working through your outcomes, you may have been having to pull outcome data from the CAPER template, but then also having to manually associate outcomes with different strategic plan goals. And one way to limit that need for manual corrections is to make sure that you're using the same goal outcome indicators throughout the process. So when you set up a strategic plan in your 5-year plan, and here in this example, it's a homeowner rehab. So you're rehabbing existing housing stock in a neighborhood is your strategic plan. And your 5-year goal is 200 units to be rehabbed. When you then set up your action plan goal, you want to make sure that you're using the same goal outcome indicator. And the IDIS does not require you to use the same goal outcome indicator. You can use a different goal outcome indicator, but it is a best practice if you're using the same one, and manually checking and make sure, okay, my action plan goal is using the same GOI as my strategic plan. And then finally, when you get to the project tab, making sure that your goal outcome indicator listed in your project is the same as what's in your action plan and in your strategic plan. So to think about this a little bit differently, let's just look at this flow chart here, and it begins with your strategic plan. You have a goal in which the outcome is again homeowner rehab. And in your 5 action plans, you have a goal in which the outcome that you're measuring, also units, rehabbed units. Now within that, you may have 2 projects that are set up and both have a goal outcome indicator. You want to make sure again that those are also homeowner rehab as the goal outcome indicator. And then finally, where it drills down and where it will connect to the reporting in your CAPR is when you move away from the eCon planning suite and into your activity setup and to make sure that you're using the appropriate matrix code. And in this case, that matrix code would be one of the 14 matrix codes to indicate homeowner rehab. And if you're able to go in and do a quality check from strategic plan to action plan goals to your projects through your activities and making sure that you're using the same goal outcome indicator or matrix code, it will make that reporting when you get to this screen on your CAPR, on the CR05 screen, so much easier to navigate, and so much more of the data will be automatically populating this screen. The last reminder or tip that we have for you on your action plans is on your projects. If you copy your annual action plan, it will automatically copy all of your prior year projects and maintain them as a prior year project. That means, as you see here on this screenshot, that program year stays at 2016. And I'll show you this in IDIS in a minute, but when you copy those projects forward, you're not able to edit that program year. So while all of the other content copies forward, you're able to keep a lot of that more general content within your action plan, you will need to delete and create new projects each year. If you are deleting your projects and the project name has a special character, an ampersand or a dash or a pound sign, you will need to rename that project without the character, save, and then click remove. You're not able to remove projects with any of those special characters. That will be fixed in a future release of IDIS, but for right now, that is the troubleshooting tip. So let's go into IDIS. And we'll come back. I'm going to go back to the action plan that we just created by copying. And so that was this 2017 4.4. We'll click Edit. And coming down to the project screen, I can click Edit on any one of these. And you see I can edit all of the content except for that program year. I can't change that program year. So again, what you need to do is you need to remove those projects and create a new project for 2017. This is the exact same process as what you would have done with your projects prior to the eCon Planning Suite. You need to continue that process. Yes, before we move on to questions, I know we've gotten a lot of great questions that have come in. Any other recommendations that you would like to make on action plan setup?
So the really important things we've hit on several times already. One, make sure you're associating with the correct original consolidated plan. Two, make sure that AD26 screen is correct before you hit save. And three, it's real important that you delete out those old projects and look at setting up new projects for each annual action plan. That helps streamline your CAPER and the data that pulls from IDIS on a regular basis. It creates less headache at CAPER time as well. I think Chris is going to show you a little bit about how to do that.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note, as you remove a project, you are not removing it from all of IDIS. When you remove it from your action plan, you are only removing it from that specific action plan. If you click remove, it will give you a warning message saying just that. You say yes, and it will remove that project for you. So that is a process that you'll want to do going through with all of your projects. For me, when I'm working on an action plan, what I like to do is if I'm going to have a similar set of projects going from 2016 into 2017, is I may print out those 2016 projects and have those projects out in front of me. And then as I'm creating a new project, I can use the same general description, make sure I'm using the same goal outcome indicators, but you will need to create new projects. And you do that at the very bottom of the screen by clicking on Add a Project. And then selecting Create a New Project. And you'll see here when I do that, the program year is now 2017. So with that, let's pause. I know, John, we've gotten some great questions coming in. We want to turn to a few questions.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, a lot of good questions coming in. So let's get to them. So the first question actually is a consortium question. And it goes, if I am a participating grantee in a home consortium, but receive my own allocation of CDBG, do I create a separate action plan for CDBG?
A great question. Beth referenced this earlier, but no, for planning purposes, your entire CPD planning process is linked within that consortium. The lead entity, when they create their action plan, it will create a separate action plan template for the participating jurisdiction to be able to go in and fill out the content related to CDBG. But participating grantees should not ever create a separate or standalone action plan for CDBG or ESG or HOPWA. All of that is embedded in the consortium template.
That's a really good answer. This is Beth again from HUD headquarters. The system is set up for those who are members of consortia, that when the lead creates that consolidated plan, it also creates a package of all the other plans that are needed for entitlement participating members, those who get CDBG and ESG as well. So there's no need to set up a separate, distinct plan if you're a CDBG entitlement. They're all packaged together that the lead will create for you in the system.
Thanks again, Beth and Chris. Okay, another question. Here's one on the action plan. I'm trying to change my annual plan goals in my action plan, but they are not editable.
A great question. We can go into IDIS and we can demonstrate that. So I'm going to close out here from the projects and open up my goals screen. And your annual action plan goals are pulling directly from your strategic plan goals. And so I am not able to create a new goal or I'm not able to significantly revise a goal in the action plan template that may require an amendment to my strategic plan. What I am able to do in my action plan is I can choose which of my strategic plan goals I will be including in the current action plan. And I can also, I'll just click here and edit. I can update my narrative, but you'll see that some of the content, my category, my start year, end year, outcome, and objective, I can't edit any of that content because that is tied to my strategic plan goal. And so I would actually need to go in and make an amendment to my strategic plan to be able to edit that content. And you'll see here on the home screen, it looks like I click on add a goal, see if there's any additional goals. I get an error message that says no con plan goal available. That means that all of my strategic plan goals from my consolidated plan are already included in the action plan template. I can't create an additional goal. Again, if I wanted to create a new goal, I would need to go in and make an amendment to my consolidated plan. So for those of you who in the first or the second poll question were wavering, you're not sure if you're going to have to make an amendment to your consolidated plan prior to your 2017 action plan, if you need to significantly revise or add a new strategic plan goal for your 2017 program year, you will need to do an amendment and complete an amendment to your consolidated plan, to your strategic plan, prior to beginning your 2017 action plan.
Those of you who are on the fence about whether you'll need to do an amendment or not, it's good to know that anything in your strategic plan, those SP screens of your consolidated plan, that information feeds down to future year action plans and capers, and that's that grayed out information that shows up on your different screens. Those changes are made in the SP, the strategic plan screens, not in your annual action plan.
Right, so to build off of that, Beth, the same point, and I'm seeing a couple of questions on this, is if you're receiving a new funding source. I know an example here is a grantee who will begin receiving ESG funds. To add ESG funds, that will require an amendment to your strategic plan to include ESG in your consolidated plan, and then allow those funds to trickle down and feed into your 2017 and future action plans. Great questions. John, other questions coming in?
Yeah, here's a common one, another action plan one. When is it better to copy or create a new action plan?
So again, going back, and we can go back to that in the wrong direction. I'd go back to this slide. It is really up to you if you would rather copy or create a new action plan template. I think generally, if it is going to be very similar in what you're doing year in and year out, or for a period of 2 to 3 years, then it may be easiest to copy. If you are going to have more significant changes, then I would recommend creating a new action plan. That doesn't mean that you won't manually take content from a previous action plan and copy that into your new 2017 action plan, but it may be easier to start with a blank action plan. I think, John, we have time for 2 more questions.
All right. Let's do a quick one on projects. Can you explain why to remove projects from a copied plan again?
Absolutely. So let me come out of here and come back into IDIS. This is an important point. So removing the projects, when you copy your plan from 2016 to 2017, right, it will automatically copy those projects verbatim forward, meaning that it will not update the project year. You therefore need to remove those projects and update them with a new project for 2017. So otherwise, you will be rewriting or writing over your 2016 project, not necessarily updating it or creating a new 2017 project, which is why you need to remove those projects and create new projects.
Could you talk a little bit about what that means when it comes time to do the caper? If you don't remove those old projects, you just use them again?
Yeah, absolutely. So you would be, essentially you would be rewriting over the goal outcome indicators that are included in that project for both 2016 and for 2017. So you would be in a position where you would be underreporting on the outcomes and on the accomplishments that you were realizing, because everything would just be tied to the single project with less funding associated to it, because it would just be your 1 year of funding still.
All right, can we slip in one more here? Let's see.
Sure.
How do we copy the first year action plan that is embedded in the con plan to create the 2017 action plan?
Sure, it's a great question, John. So just go back in time here and pretend that we're going from 2015 into 2016. And so if that's the case, we're using San Antonio here for our example. We are wanting to copy the action plan that was embedded in our 2015 consolidated plan, version 1. So I would come into my consolidated plan. I would make note of the year, 2015 version 1. And where I would click copy under the annual action plan still. And that's an important distinction. I'm still copying just the annual action plan screens. So I will want to click copy here. Here's where I would enter 2015, 1. Here would be 2016. Let's see, it may not let us do 2016 still. And it does. And back to 2016 now. And we see here we have the version 3 that I just created a copy of. And that would be how to copy your action plan for a year 2. So I think with that, we can pause and we will move on to talk through amendments. And I think we'll have more time for questions after talking through amendments. Just back here. Okay.
All right.
We'll start.
Yeah, so we're going to do a poll now. So I'm going to put a poll up there, basically asking about, have you completed an annual action plan amendment in the eCon planning suite? So let me launch the poll. And again, just go ahead and type in the answer that applies to your situation. Have you completed an annual action plan amendment in the eCon planning suite? All right. All right, let's take a look at our plans, at our results rather. So as we can see, just about a third of you, 32%, have completed an amendment in the eCon planning suite, while half of you have not. But there is a 18% of you that said, well, I haven't done it yet, but I will be for the end of the program year 2016. So some have not yet done it yet, but intend to do it very shortly.
Great. So for those of you who are planning to do it soon or are maybe in the middle of the process now, hopefully we can answer some of your questions. And for those of you who haven't done it, we'll talk through the process as you may be completing an amendment at some point in your comp plan cycle. Let's just look at the amendment process here and where it falls together. So we begin with the consolidated plan, and that moves us through our year 1 through year 5 action plans. And then that moves us through our corresponding capers. Now let's just say hypothetically at the end of year 2, you will be amending your action plan. So now what that means is all of a sudden your amended year 2 action plan is what you'll want to be using to inform your year 2 caper, and you don't want that year 2 caper to be based off of your original year 2 action plan. And you also don't necessarily want that original year 2 action plan to be the basis for your year 3 action plan. You want that amended year 2 action plan to be the basis for your year 3 action plan. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail and walk through that process. So we begin with our approved year 2 action plan, and our goal, the end of the process, is to get to our year 2 caper and our year 3 action plan. So the first question is, do you need to make an amendment to your action plan? And this is where you're looking at your citizen participation plan to determine if you're making a substantial amendment or a non-substantial amendment, or you may determine that what you're doing is actually only a change to activities and doesn't necessarily constitute an amendment to your action plan. So beginning with the answer being no, it becomes a very easy process. Your year 2 action plan directly informs your year 2 caper, and you're able to create a copy of that year 2 action plan to be the basis of your year 3 action plan. Now, we're not spending a lot of time talking about capers today, but I think this is a very important note to make. Hold off on creating your caper in IDIS until the end of the program year, once you are absolutely positive that you won't be amending that current year action plan. If you are amending your current year action plan, you want that amended version to be the basis for your caper. and your CAPER is automatically created and based off of your most recent action plan. So if you haven't created that amendment yet at the point of creating your CAPER, that CAPER will be tied to the original year 2 action plan, not the amended version. And so what does that look like? We can look at now what the process would be if we're amending our plan. So you determine that you need to amend it. Your first step will be to create a copy of the year 2 action plan. Once you complete that amendment, it's substantial or non-substantial, that amendment needs to be submitted to HUD and marked as review completed in IDIS. The reason being, that action plan being marked as review completed is what signals to your CAPER to pull from the most recently approved or recently completed action plan. And so that process of that action plan amendment being marked as completed needs to happen before you create your year 2 CAPER. Once that's done, you can then create your year 2 CAPER and then use a copy of that to create your year 3 action plan. And again, you want to be using that amended version as the basis for your year 3 action plan. And that is absolutely true if you are amending your consolidated plan and wanting to keep your year 3 action plan tied to your most current consolidated plan. Now, it's a lot of moving parts. I'm going to pause there, and Beth or John, if you have any other clarifying points to make through the amendment process.
It's just really important to stay associated with the most recent consolidated plan so your information flows correctly into the next annual action plan and CAPER. And more importantly, as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, that review completed status, whether it's for your action plan or your amendment, is what tells IDIS to have the rest of the information flow to future action plans and CAPERs. So not only do you want to do that amendment prior to creating a CAPER, you also want to make sure it's in review completed status before you create the next action plan or CAPER document.
Great, thanks, Beth. So with that, just like in creating the 2017 action plan, there are some exceptions for consortia grantees. The consortia lead must initiate all amendments. The participating jurisdiction within the consortia cannot start an amendment, just as it cannot begin a new action plan or create a copy of a new action plan. It can't start the amendment or create the copy for the amendment. With that in mind, it is the best practice for all of the members of the consortia to coordinate the timing of their amendments that they're entering into IDIS. And that is to avoid creating a copy for one jurisdiction and then a copy for a second and a copy for a third and a copy for a fourth, all at different times in the program year. And then finally, the lead must also submit the amendment in IDIS and submit that to HUD. Even if the amendment is only for one of the participating members, the lead is the one in IDIS who is submitting that. A few best practices that we've touched upon already. Right? As Beth just said, always work off of your most recent action plan, consolidated plan. Right? That will always help to make sure that you're staying current within the program. 2, within IDIS, we recommend completing your amendments at one time and at the end of the program year. Now, you still need to follow all of the requirements of your citizen participation plans. You still need to be documenting your amendments in your program file. But we do recommend that you enter them in IDIS at one time near the end of your program year. And this will prevent you from having multiple versions in IDIS. And you can enter all of those amendments at once in one amended version. And again, your amendments must be marked as review completed prior to starting your caper. Beth, any other best practices that you would like to recommend?
I think you've hit them all.
Great. So I know that second point is completing your amendments in IDIS at once. Bring some questions. So I'd like to just walk through the approach and compare it to the paper version of action plans and amendments and just show you how we can build off of that on a parallel track. So, just to review, prior to the eCon planning suite, the amendment process was beginning with identifying the amendment need, completing the amendment to your plan. If it was a substantial amendment, completing the public comment period, public review, updating your program file with the amended action plan, and then notifying HUD of the amendment per 24 CFR Part 91.505C, which should either be notifying HUD at the point of the amendment being made or at the end of the program year. Within the eCon planning suite, that process is really pretty similar. You begin by identifying your amendment need. If you're not wanting to complete multiple amendments in 1 year in IDIS, you can complete that amendment in hard copy, still go through all of the requirements as set forth in your citizen participation plan, completing public comment periods, public review, putting the document before council, updating the program file with your amended action plan, notifying HUD of the amendments per the same set of requirements at 91.505C. And then what we recommend is entering all of those amendments at one time in IDIS. This will really help you within the system manage the version control of having multiple amendments in IDIS.
And Chris, you just made a really good point. Throughout this webinar, we've talked a lot about making sure you have the latest and most correct version when you make a copy or do an amendment. And by doing your amendments all at one time in IDIS, it helps control how many versions you have in the system and make sure that you're attaching those future year action plans and capers to the right, most correct version as well. You know, the reg at 91.505 really states that a jurisdiction can decide to submit a copy of each amendment to HUD as it occurs or at the end of the program year. So we do recommend that you notify HUD that you've made the amendment, just like you would with the regulation already states. You send a letter to your field office and a copy of that amendment, that public comment process that happened. But in the system, you do that update all at one time right before you do the caper in the system. Similar to what we used to do in the paper process, for those of you who've been around a while, you would notify HUD that you did the amendment, but in the back of that paper caper, you would submit kind of a list of all of your amendments at one time then. We're doing the same thing now, we're just doing it in the system instead.
a great point, Beth.
And a final comment I think I want to hone in on is the consortia. If we talked throughout the webinar today about how the lead of the consortia drives the whole econ plan suite process, this is a really nice time to do amendments all at once for consortia members and the lead. Since the lead has to make that copy and make that amendment occur in the system for all the participating members, it's great to coordinate that happens at one time for everyone to do their updates and amendments, and not multiple times for the lead to have to take that action.
Thank you, Beth. And I do also want to add in a point on state grantees. There have been a couple of questions from state grantees about the project process and on the Housing Trust Fund for state grantees. There is more guidance coming out soon on the Housing Trust Fund. And for projects, our recommendation to make sure that your projects and your outcomes are being included in your paper and in your outcomes and in your reporting is to go through this amendment process near the end of the program year and to complete the AP35 screen with all of the projects that were set up during the course of your program year. And then that will include all of those projects and then linking the corresponding activities and ultimately linking the outcomes to your paper and making it easier for you to tell your story, highlight your accomplishments within your paper.
That's right, Chris. It's typically okay for a state grantee to leave that AP35, the project screen, blank or not completely filled out, since they need to do their method of distribution to get their funds out. They'll fill out their method of distribution screen with that detail, and then once that process is completed, they know what their projects are. They can go back into the action plan through the amendment process to complete the project screen.
Great. I do want to, at the very end, just highlight where all of the resources are on the HUD Exchange, but I think we have time, John, for a few more questions.
Okay, great. So we did have some questions come in on amendments. We'll focus on those. So one question is, what is the difference between a substantial amendment and a non-substantial amendment?
That is a great question. I think, Beth, that's probably one of the most frequent questions you and I get as it relates to amendments. There's two places that you should be looking in understanding the definition of a substantial amendment. The first is the regs on amendments, which is that CFR Part 91.505 describing amendments. And second, and more importantly, is your citizen participation plan. And your citizen participation plan is where you're defining both what is a substantial amendment, but you're also describing the process that you as a grantee will be carrying out to complete those amendments, to engage the public, to engage your council, to engage other stakeholders as you work through the amendment process. So it varies quite a bit in terms of what is a substantial, or it doesn't vary quite a bit, but it does vary some for what is a substantial amendment for one grantee versus another. So always important to look at your citizen participation plan.
That's right, Chris. So basically, you want to follow the regulation at 91.505. That clearly lays out what qualifies as a substantial amendment. And then your citizen participation plan could have added additional requirements that require that to become a substantial amendment. That's a local decision in this participation plan, as long as the requirements of 505 are also covered.
Other questions, John?
Okay. Yeah, so we have another amendment question. How do we amend the 2013 through 2017 Consolidated Plan in IDIS if it is marked Review Completed? Ask the field office to mark it open for editing? That is your amendment question.
A great question, and looks like we just timed out here, so I'll actually just come back to the PowerPoint. We won't go back in and log in. But if your consolidated plan or if your action plan are marked as review completed, you will need to create a copy of that consolidated plan or of that action plan to create the amendment. And when you're creating a copy, we'll just come back a ways into our slides. When you're creating that copy, either of a consolidated plan or of the action plan, you would just be entering your source program year as 2016, your version, and your new program year would be the same year. It would still be 2016. And then you would check the if amendment box and you would select substantial or non-substantial from that drop-down menu. That will create a complete copy of your consolidated plan or of your annual action plan, and you'll be able to go through, make the corresponding edits, and then submit that new version to HUD. What it is doing for you, and this is a security for both the grantee and for HUD, is that it's not letting you overwrite that original version. So you're still able to keep that within the system, and it documents the revision history of your consolidated plan or of your action plan for that year. So it creates a brand new version with the same years, either the con plan cycle or the action plan year, and you're able to update that and then resubmit that new version to HUD.
Okay, we're running a little late, but do you want to do one more question?
Yeah, I think we've got time for one or two more questions.
Okay. What is the process to update the citizen participation plan? Does it have to be updated along with the action plan?
It's a great question. It looks like a number of questions on citizen participation plans have come in since the question you just asked. The process for updating your citizen participation plan, in part, it should be described in your citizen participation plan. What would be the process for updating that? Generally, it is something that you can do at any point in the program year. It is often done at the same time as the action plan or the con plan, or now as part of the AFH. There is a requirement as you're moving into starting your AFH that all citizen participation plans need to be updated at the start of your AFH to incorporate your assessment of fair housing into that plan. And then the process and the requirements for your CPP are described in the regs, and I don't know off the top of my head the exact citation for your citizen participation plan, but it is included in 24 CFR Part 91.
That's right, Chris. So for local governments entitlements, it's at 91.1 and then at 91.2 if you're a state.
Thank you, Beth. John, I think we have time for just one more question.
All right. Here's another one. May we amend a con plan and a past action plan prior to submission the 2017?
Absolutely. And I think especially if you're making an amendment to your consolidated plan to reflect, maybe it's a new target area, maybe it's a new goal, or you're revising a goal, You can begin that amendment process now, prior to starting your 2017 action plan. And you actually need to do it prior to starting your 2017 action plan. So that 2017 action plan can be associated with the amended consolidated plan. Likewise, if you need to make an amendment to your 2016 action plan, you can go ahead and you can start that amendment now and work through those changes and make sure that you're able to finish that amendment before you begin your caper. So I know a number of you have asked questions on timing of what is the anticipated timeline for funding, which we don't have a definite answer for you on. But if you are in a position where you do need to amend your consolidated plan, you can go ahead and get started on that amendment process now while you're waiting to begin your 2017 action plan. I know we just have 1 minute left, so I would just like to highlight where all of the resources are that we've talked about, and we'll make sure to send all of these out to you. We will also be putting the transcript and the PowerPoint slides and a recording of this PowerPoint. If you just couldn't quite get enough of Beth, John, and me talking, you can listen to it again. All of that will go up on the HUD Exchange. But we will also send out links to where are all of the ConPlan resources that are available. And they're all on the HUD Exchange, on the Consolidated Plan, and on the eCon Planning site. And what I do just want to point out here, as we're in our last minute, is the set of quick guides. And these walk you through step by step, transactionally, how to create a con plan, create a year 2 or a year 3 action plan if you're a state grantee, if you're a consortia grantee, if you're a regional grantee, amend your consolidated plan or amend your action plan, and then create a caper. So we will make sure to send all of these links out to you after today's session. And we will also send you an email when the content from today's session gets posted on the HUD Exchange. With that, I know we are just about out of time. Thank you all for joining us. Beth and John, thank you so much for joining and presenting with us today. Good luck, everyone, on your action plans and on your amendments.